Yes.
Still speaking on security, there have been recurring problems between the men of SARS and Nigerians. What do you think about the whole End SARS campaign?
Well, it was important to show that citizens were not going to keep taking such abusive relationship. And so being able to mobilize citizens is another level of demonstrating that when citizens demand for accountability, something should happen. So the lesson from that campaign, as well as many other campaigns that we have done successfully in the country, is that the era when citizens are waiting for some messiah to come and save them is over. Citizens collectively working together can tip the indifference of government toward action. The action is yet tentative, but at least action has started.
So, similar to that, your activism in supporting, championing the cause for the release of the Chibok girls, many people felt that was say politically motivated, and not some personal target of yours. How were you able to balance, or how have you been able to balance championing that cause and not looking to be intentionally sabotaging the efforts of the government?
I think that our society has always, unfortunately, been governed in the way that governments don't think that when they fail in the responsibility, the duty that they have constitutionally, that citizens must have a voice to demand for accountability. That's the only reason that anybody would think that we, as women and men who came together and said, you can't ignore 219 young women who went to school and were abducted. You can't ignore their parents. You've never ignored the people of a certain class in our society who have been kidnapped at one time or the other. Often, when a big man or a big woman is kidnapped in the country, you see the machineries of government work very efficiently, and in a matter of latest 72 hours, we're told the person has been found and released. And we were being told that 219 young women who went to school had disappeared from their school system, and the government expected us all to keep quiet. There's nothing to defend there. I don't even bother going into the conversation, because I simply say to people that if you didn't see the shared humanity, the sense of shared humanity with those girls that made us step out for them, that's your personal choice. But you can't determine our own choices. Our choice was to be the voices of these vulnerable families that did not mean anything to our government, under which they were abducted, and then which were not obviously meaning anything to the government that took over, because once we reminded them that girls were still not back, they decided that we were adversarial. And so they acted exactly in the same way that the previous government. And what I have tried to say to Nigerians is that regardless of the reaction of government to the advocacy that you do as a citizen, don't let anybody intimidate you. You are the one that gave legitimacy to government. Government cannot become superior and repressive to you. It is unconstitutional that should happen. So be bold and courageous in your conviction. And that's what we've done by continuing to stand for Chibok girls. Part of why we've stood for this long is that in those early days, we made a promise, not realizing how long it would take. We made a promise that we would not stop advocating for Chibok girls until they all return. So we have to keep our word. That's integrity. So even though it's a cost to us in every sense of the word, and by the way, A lot of Nigerians assume that when you're doing this kind of advocacy, it's because it's an NGO. BBOG is not an NGO. We made a resolve that we would not take any donation from anybody. We don't need it. We simply said our money, personal little contributions will be where our hearts are. It's with those girls. We share the pain of the families. I was Minister of Education. One of the areas that I championed through my policies was girl-child education. So if I championed girl-child education and girls went to school in a place like Borno, which was one of the 3 core states where girls were lowest number in school in this country, then I would now look away. I couldn't unlook. I have no apologies for standing for Chibok girls and for Leah Charibo. Did you see how quickly they did that of Dapchi, except for the pain that they left Leah Charibo behind? We must be a society where we don't unlook. If anything happens, we must all say the victim matters to all of us. Chibok girls are victims. Leah Charibo is a victim. The Ran women were victims. Anyone that is in a state of tragedy, all of us must feel the pain, because you and I, we are diminished every time one of us is diminished.
Still speaking on the girl child now, what do you think about being a woman in Nigeria? It is said that Nigeria is really terrible to women, and most women, I am a woman, most women complain that it's really tough being a woman in Nigeria. What do you think about this and feminism as a whole?
So, for quite a long time, our society has been patriarchal. It's cultural that men are dominant. Not just us. I was speaking to a friend of mine, a lady who is the ambassador of her country, and she was telling me some of the things. Like, she was saying something like, when, this is a European country by the way, that wives who quickly give birth to sons are more acknowledged, more celebrated in the country in Europe. Okay, so these are things that are cultural, sociological, historical context. There are quite a number of people who point to religious. Some of the religious I am able to debunk because I'm the wife of a pastor, and so I know a little bit about the Bible. And I do know that in Genesis 1:28, when God created humanity, he did not in any way give that mandate of be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue and have dominion. He said it to humanity, made up of male and female. So there's nothing in God that subordinated the womanhood to males. Simply that people distort the relational thing that in the gospel, Apostle Paul basically was saying that for a home to run well in a family, there has to be somebody who is the head of the household. And he said, your husband is the head of the household. That's a family structure. That's the godliness around how you have to work together. He even said in that scripture that you should submit one to another. And in love, he said a woman should submit to her husband just as Christ is the head of the church. So, so people have decided to distort the word. I have a relationship with my husband where I respect him according to what the Bible has laid out. He does that respect for me also according to the way the Bible has laid out. The last thing that should happen is that every man that sees a woman should suddenly say, I am your superior because you are a woman. God didn't have that in mind. That's not what he created. So what we should do is run societies in the way that God envisaged it, that his people would be fruitful, they would multiply, they would have dominion, they would subdue, and they would dominate, so that everyone, girls, boys, would be given the opportunity to be the best and to fulfill that God's purpose for humanity. When people distort it, what they do is they stagnate their society. They stagnate their society because you cannot play with half your team and do well. Societies that play with their full team, males and females, giving them the opportunities to be the best that they can be, are the ones that are the higher rung of the economic league table. When you look at some of the countries that are struggling with development, they are the ones that ignore their women. It's not by mistake. They are playing with half their team. You have to maximize your human resource. Your human resource is made up of males and females. Give them all the opportunities. Even look at it in terms of the family level. At the family level, when you see families where the girls are given opportunity to be as productive as their brothers, they are the families that do better than the families that said, these ones are girls, keep them at home. They tend more to poverty. Do you get the point? So it is important that we should be very clear in our minds that the conversation around equality of rights for males and females in society is really a conversation that is godly. It is saying that you must not hold any gender down. Allow everyone the opportunity they need to be the best that they can be.
But in the course of your daily duty, soften your tone because you're a woman.
Oh, you find all kinds of people. You're talking about daily activities. Recently, I was doing a radio program after I declared, and the man said that nobody is going to vote for a female president in Nigeria. He's talking for himself, right? But he says nobody, right? So in his mind, everybody thinks like he does, So I then said to him, I said, sir, you know what's interesting? Some of the young ones in your family are probably listening to you. After this program, be sure that they will call you aside, sit you down, and tell you that the world has moved on since the last time that you had this kind of idea, because it's a different society. The young men, look at the young men, most of them are he for she, inclined. They understand that stable societies, cohesive societies, harmonious societies are societies that are inclusive in the way that they run. Diversity is a great gain. It's not, if you manage diversity well, the benefit of diversity is that it brings innovation, creativity. We have found that companies where they have women in positions of authority outperform the ones that do not have women in their leadership cadre. So when you talk to me and you don't talk to me from the perspective of the character, the capacity and the competence that I bring to an environment, you're the one who loses. I don't lose. Because in my own case, and that is what I tell women to always do, in my own case, I stand not on the sentiments of the conversation. I stand on the issues. Women must be issue-based. Don't get into the, you're talking to me like this because I'm a woman. No. Face the issues. Keep with the issues. And just take a stance on what you believe. Do a lot in terms of working with other women to amplify your voices. If they say that, you have to lower your tone, you have to say to them that actually, I don't think that tone is the issue here. I think it's the substance of what I am trying to convey that is the issue. There are many ways to take away these problems. Some of the challenges are economic, some are social, some are self-imposed. There are some women who have imposed a barrier on themselves. We need to help them to get to the place where they can find their voices. Women always have a way of thinking, what's every other person thinking of me? Don't worry. The people you're worried about are worrying what you're thinking of them. So don't impose a barrier. Don't shut down on yourself. And if we need to identify whether sometimes it's a matter of low self-esteem. So we need to find ways of psychologically building up women to get to the place where they can own their voices, where they can be at peace with who they are, and not be wanting validation from sources that would seek to invalidate them. One of the things that my dad did very well for me, and I say it to to most of the men, well, to all the men that think that I am their mentor, I say to them that it's the father that can best validate a daughter. Once my father validated me, nobody on earth can invalidate me. It doesn't matter who you think you are. You can't invalidate me. My father told me who I am. So, and that's it. I locked in there, so you can't come and tell me who I am not, So, but we must do more as a society. At the family level, we need more parents who show the girl child that she's a treasure, and that the same opportunities that are due to brothers, cousins who are male will be due to her. She must get an education. She must get opportunity to be the best that she can be. At the community level, we must take some of this sociological stuff that are lies. I recall when there was a time, I did meet it as a child, when women eating egg was considered as, wow, that means this woman would have too much long throat and she can easily be led astray by men. Yes, wow. There were communities where for a woman to, when egg is being cracked and she's all looking and wanting to get some of it, it's like, you're a long throat person, we have to keep an eye on you because you can easily go bad, So some of those cultural, sociological nonsense, we have to pack them and throw away, and then we have to bring in policies that support women. For example, you will be shocked that there are some places in this same country where companies would pay a woman lower wages than they pay the man who is doing similar job as herself. So that wage discrimination, we must tackle it because it is not right. It is unjust. People cannot do the same kind of work and then you pay one higher than the other. That's unjust. That's unfair. So there are many policy-related aspects of fixing this gender inequality problem. And then we need to have more representation of women. A country that has done well is Rwanda. Rwanda now has 68% of the parliament being women. That's amazing. Oh my God. And now look at what the Ethiopian prime minister is doing. He's just trying to overtake, because today he's got a cabinet that's 50-50. Now his president is a woman, because it's it's parliamentary system of government. So they have a ceremonial president, and then the parliament, the cabinet, the government is formed by the prime minister and the cabinet. So then he appointed a Supreme Court justice who is a woman. So he's just checking all the right boxes in showing any girl child in Ethiopia today, looking at the color of government, would have that motivation. They would be inspired to pursue and to do greater work. So representation in government is very key, because it then percolates all the way to private sector and to community. Then the final thing with tackling the issue of gender inequality is to also make sure that economic opportunities are made available to women. What we found in one of the studies that we did in my role as a development person, economic development person, is that when we gave inputs to female farmers similar to the inputs that their male counterparts had, they actually outperformed their male counterparts. Do you see that? So economic productivity of women often hampered by our missing the fact that they need the kind of access that their male counterparts take for granted. So policy can begin to address those kinds of challenges.
It is widely believed that politics in Nigeria is grassroots. So you have to go to the grassroots level. So, with your aspirations, how far have you gone in, say, creating awareness for people who would not normally key into what ACPN is about?
Yes. So I am a grassroots person. You know, the thing about my trajectory in life is how I can sit with the people in the market. I can go to Oyinbo and totally just, melt into the Oyinbo situation. And you can also find me sitting at the White House having so I am that adaptable, an individual. In what we have done so far, we have spoken in languages that the people understand. So I had to burnish my pidgin English. I had to figure a way to get my Yoruba, to thread together into meaningful conversation. I have done my Igbo one. My Hausa is nowhere to be found, but by ensuring translation of the things that I say. So in the awareness building space, we have a strategy to actually ensure communication. So we'll do that. Because I have always been someone who's interested in what happens to people at the bottom of the pyramid. Because any society where those who are privileged don't look down and say what's going on at that level is a society that is in peril. You would have this kind of a situation where you say the rich cannot sleep because the poor are awake. You don't want that kind of a situation. That's the kind of situation you have in the northeast of Nigeria, or say in the Middle Belt, or the south of Nigeria. Wherever you see destabilization, something has broken in society. The fabric of what makes for cohesion has broken down. And so we must pay attention to what's going on. That's why lifting people out of poverty is my critical agenda. The more we lift people out of hopelessness, out of a state of being forgotten, they would get a sense that they are important members of our society. They would have a stake that they need to protect. How often do you see big men just stop their car on the road and start fighting? They have something to protect. Yeah, so fighting is not part of it. They have to figure out a different kind of mechanism for resolving their disagreement. We need to take as many of our people to the place where they realize that, physical brawls are just very Stone Age ways of resolving conflicts that are inevitable in human relationship.
You served under former President Obasanjo as minister. Are there any regrets? And at some point, you also partially endorsed President Buhari in 2015. Do you have any regrets?
Wow. This partially endorsed President Buhari, whether you said it partially or fully, no such thing happened. I basically find it actually unfair for people to make the demand that we made for Chibok girls as being the equivalence of an endorsement. That's wrong. The people who framed that narrative and kept pushing it ended up dividing our society that should have been united for the cause of Chibok girls. It was unfair to those girls. You know, there was no need for it. If anything happens to one of us, it happens to all of us. So imagine that the government at that time immediately swung into action. You know what we found through research and through things that happened in other places is that 72 hours after abduction is the best time within which to do a quick search and a find and rescue operation. But we missed it because the government at that time appeared to deny that a tragedy had happened. Now, if the government had swung into action, there wouldn't have been any need for BBOG. Bring Back Our Girls was really a reaction to that tentativeness and indifference to the tragedy that happened. So to now just impugn us, especially impugn me, for reacting in favor of children who were vulnerable and weak and whose parents did not have the voice, that's wrong. Because what people who do that are saying is that should those girls have been their daughters, they wouldn't have wanted me and the rest of the members of BBOG to stand for their children. So there was no such endorsement. I had my own choice in my elections, but in the elections, nobody knew who I was going to vote for. That was mine. And I believe very much in character, in integrity. I was never going to mix up the matter of Chibok girls with any politics. They didn't go together. Chibok girls' advocacy was a humanitarian advocacy. That's an entirely different thing. But people who push that narrative, I leave them to it. They let their own spirit judge them at some point. On working for President Obasanjo, the only regrets that I have is that a lot of the work that we did, people did not continue. You know, I mean, this public procurement reform, we have the Bureau for Public Procurement. I was one that led the team that worked on the bill that was passed into law to create the Bureau for Public Procurement to implement the due process. At the time I was implementing the due process, it was so effective. Nigerians ended up calling me Madam Due Process. I hated to be called that, you know, but I had to carry it. You know, I remember the former Speaker of the House of Reps telling me that forever and ever, that's one of your names. You need to put it on your passport, you know. The due process today, sometimes I meet people who say to me, due process is no longer due process. How do you think that makes you feel? You know, then NEITI, Nigeria Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, that brought scrutiny over what goes on in the oil sector. Oil sector used to be so distant and so unknown, you know, opaque. We're back to it though, because right now we don't know what's going on in that sector. But the NEITI that I designed and implemented was well globally acknowledged. So, you know, unfortunately, NEITI is not given the kind of priority that it should have. It had it then, it doesn't have it anymore. Then we have the work that I did in solid minerals, doing the airborne geophysical survey of the country and finding clearly that we have 34 classes of minerals in 430 locations of the country. Data that was never available in the past. We had to build a geological survey agency. We had to do a new law that I worked on, and that law is the Minerals Act 2007. And you know, it removed the discretionary powers of a minister and put it in a mining cadastral system that's technology-based, ensuring transparency in the granting of licenses and leases. So if you looked at the kind of things that one did in government, including what one did in education, design over 400 reform measures. In solid minerals was 107 reform measures, At the time that I was leaving solid minerals, we had done 97 of those measures. At the time I was leaving education, we had done some 200, a little above 200 of the measures. You needed to complete them. What happened? What happened? That's the regret. Other than that, I am so glad that I went into government for 6.5 years, gave of my best. I was one person in government that people up until today tell me that when I was in government, they saw clearly that I was moving in a direction of serving the public. That it was everything around my work in government was on the same good governance that I, as a child, I had said I was going to offer. Now, the reason that I am running in this election is because I'm tired, I'm fed up of failure. Completely fed up of the failure in our country. I am fed up of the fact that we've ended up as the world capital of extreme poverty. Fed up of the fact that 3 to 4 million young people will leave their secondary school or university and only 10% of them would likely find anything called decent jobs. What happens to the rest, millions and millions of them? I am fed up of the fact that the Nigerian average of number of children that die before they attain the age of 1, the ones that die before they attain the age of 5, the women that die at childbirth, that our own average is higher than that of African average. How does that even resemble what should be our lot? I'm fed up with the fact that you look at the economic prospects of the country. Countries that do not have the kind of factor endowments that we have done so well. So you look at Singapore with almost $60,000 of GDP per capita, and we're struggling at 1,947. Gosh, how did we become a country like this? I'm fed up of the acceptance of mediocrity in Nigeria, where people now would say, what more can we do? That we'll have to manage it. No. I'm fed up of the fact that we have a political class that seldom thinks of the rest of the people. Public service is exactly what it is. It's supposed to be service. Public. It is not personal service. But politics has been reduced to personal service. And my interest now is that we must disrupt this bad politics. Because if we don't get the right politics, we will not get the right governance. And if we don't get the right governance, we will not get any kind of development. I want to lead a citizens' movement where the citizens and those of us that lead will build a prosperous Nigeria that is stable and harmonious.